Hello, students, and welcome back to detention after a week of good behavior. Both Molly and I managed to stay out of detention last week, mostly because we were, playing hooky, skipping school. So we're probably going to be back here in detention for quite some time for taking so much time off. But we are back. We are going to talk today about racing, traveling to racing, dealing with fatigue, and then our main subject today, we are going to be talking about run form, what yours is like, how you can adjust it, best practices to do so, and then some suggestions for future learning. But Molly, you are literally right off of the plane from your travels to the Midwest for a whole clutch of races. 3 races in 3 weekends. What have you been up to?
I've done 3 races in 3 weekends, Chris. That's what I've been up to. It's been awesome. I did Chattanooga. I did the Chattanooga 70.3 3 weekends ago now. And then on Memorial Day, I did the University City 5K. And then last weekend on Saturday, I did 105 miles on beautiful Kansas gravel at what is now known as Unbound, FKA, Dirty Kansas.
They always I love how they call the races there like a certain distance, and then like somewhere around 20 miles from the finish, you're like, wait a second.
That's not how. Yeah, I was super angry to see that. I thought it was 100 miles, and even though I'd seen it on my Garmin the day before when I was like loading my bike computer, I was like, that says it's longer. It must be a mistake. Like, sometimes Ride with GPS sends you astray, but in this case, it was actually 105 miles, which just
And
seems mean.
the day before you're like 100, 105.
Who cares? Right.
Who cares? Yeah,
Exactly.
and
Day
what's the
of,
actual truth? Yeah.
when I saw the sign that was like 20 miles to the finish and I was at mile 85, I was like, no, it's not. It's 15. And then when I got to mile 100, I was like, maybe I can just stay here because this is all I signed up for. Like, I did what I said I was going to do. I'm done. That's
Yeah, like
right.
there's a whole group of people just kind of like standing there with their like arms crossed. Just
That's not totally inaccurate, actually. There were a lot of people taking a break at that point. I think people thought, like, okay, I'm going to get to 100 and, like, then I'll be done. And then I think they maybe needed to be done for a little bit by the time they got there.
when I did that race a couple years ago, I got to like 167, 170 or something, and came upon a guy who was sitting on the ground with his head in his hands. And I was like, "How you doing, man? You okay? Do you need food? Do you need a tube?" And he was like,
I'm
"No."
just resting. Right? I'm a little sad that you didn't pull out the, like, international language of I feel sorry for you with the, hey, buddy.
No, no. I after
Hey.
Ironman Canada 2012, I never ever deployed the word buddy
Hey,
on the race
buddy.
course. Yeah, nope, nope. Buddy only means you suck and everything you do sucks.
Oh no, that's not true.
Oh, that's true.
Take
That's
back
what buddy
buddy.
means.
Take back buddy.
Stop trying to make buddy good again.
Okay. We might have to be on opposite sides of the buddy spectrum, buddy.
It's all right. I had some real trauma there.
You have
But
buddy trauma? Yeah. I get it.
Um, so you had 3 awesome races in 3 weekends. I don't know if we got a chance to recap Chattanooga because it's been a while, and I think our last show was right after it when we had Joel on.
Yeah.
But yeah, you had an awesome race. You PR'd your 70.3 distance by quite
By
a
over
large
half an
margin.
hour.
Yeah, tell us about it. Tell us about the race.
It was awesome. So race morning, there was a walk over to the start, and we did a little bit of like meandering over there, and I got to like hang out with some people and catch up with folks, and have some conversation, and walk in my vans to the start of the race. And I got in the water, and it was not actually a short swim. I've been prepared to like get schooled by cyclists because the swim was going to be so short, but it was a mile and a half, and the current wasn't that swift. It was definitely a little push, but nothing too much. So I ended up with pretty much a standard half Ironman swim. And I gave up on all of my time goals at that point. I was like, okay, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then the bike, I got off the bike about 15 minutes before I expected to. So felt really good about that. And then realized that like I could have a good day if I could just hold like 8:30 or so on the run, which it was hot. So I started pretty conservatively. That pace feels pretty good to me right now. So like I hung out there for a little bit and got gradually a little bit faster throughout the run, but stayed pretty consistent and like ate all the things and drank all the things and held all the ice and crossed the finish line and got fifth in my age group. What? That's
Got
real.
a world slot.
I got a world slot. I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. I was like, are you sure? But then I took it. So I'm going to St. George. So yeah.
Wunderbar. You know, I've been asking my athletes a lot recently for like after races, like, you know, what is something from this race that you want to make habitual, like going forward, like in your race execution and your prep? What would that be for you from Chattanooga?
I think there were a couple of big like takeaways that that I felt from this one, and the first one was definitely that like I was focused more on the experience and on like the fun of it than on the like, you know, I usually have a like strong sense of race morning dread when races show up, especially if they're going to be really long. So this is the first race I have done in as long as I can remember that I didn't have that. I was just pumped about it and, you know, feeling good and feeling strong. But I think the biggest thing that I took away from this race was that it wasn't really any different from any other race I've done. It's just that I've worked a whole lot harder in the last 18 months than I ever have. So like, it didn't feel easier and it wasn't like, you know, things didn't go wrong. Things definitely did go wrong, but like I was just stronger from having worked harder, which is an annoying thing to have be true, even though I know it's true. But like, you know, you don't want to like, you want to have like that thing that happens. You're like, now I'm fast, but like, that's not that wasn't the experience.
Right, that like suddenly everything is just going to be like effortless.
Yeah, exactly. It was still like it was hard. It was hot that day, and it was awesome. And yeah, I felt like I didn't get ahead of myself in pacing, and I didn't like try to chase anything down, and I just felt really good. Like I felt like I was having fun and seeing people and high-fiving folks and cheering people on and all that stuff. It was great.
And then turned it around, dropped way down in distance, and ran a super fast 5K a week later.
That was my 5K PR.
How did you know, a lot of the time, you know, we get so many questions about like, you know, especially these days with races getting rescheduled and then shuffled into strange places. And like a 5K is something that you need to be like fairly sharp for. How did you manage the period in between Chattanooga and that 5K so that you actually came out of that week feeling like fresh and not flat?
Well, Chris, I have a very smart coach, and that definitely helps.
Wait, other than that guy, like,
no, that was
that.
definitely the thing that made the difference. I hardly did anything that week. Like I went for a couple easy bike rides with my brother. I did the endurance school spin as a recovery spin. I think I swam once when my mom went to water aerobics. I went with her and got in the pool and did like a recovery swim, but otherwise I hardly did anything. And my legs were pretty cooked after Chattanooga. So I was not expecting to feel good on race day. But as you know, this was my most important race of the season because I was racing both of my brothers, and it's important to be the fastest Balf. So
How did, you know, like a lot, like one thing we often talk to our athletes about is like you don't have to feel good to be good.
Yeah.
Like how did you feel like race morning before the race, like on Monday morning and Sunday, like what were the sensations that you had?
So I felt really bad race morning. I woke up and St. Louis is humid and kind of hot and allergies are like out of control. So I was just like not breathing really well and my nose is all runny. And then I did our like, you know, traditional like race warm up of like pickups to about race pace. And I was picking up by effort and I was running about a minute per mile slower than I was sort of aiming for. So I was like, okay, like that's just where we're at today. Like that's fine. We'll just see what happens. But I felt like garbage that morning. And I hadn't had a whole, because it's a 5K, so I didn't have to get up early and do like the whole applesauce thing. So like I did have a gel with some caffeine right beforehand, and that definitely helped. But yeah, we got delayed by about 15 minutes because of some police activity on the course. But and we were hanging. That was fine. That was fine. And the course starts with about a 1 mile climb. And I knew that my parents were going to be, because it goes right by my house. Like it was all throughout the neighborhood that I grew up in. I saw like a million people from just my neighborhood just standing outside, which was great. And I knew my parents were going to be at the top of that hill. So I was like, I'm just going to run like pretty hard up there, and then we're just going to see what happens. But it was great. It was great. Yeah. It just kept feeling better. And I kept being able to hold on to the paces that I wanted to hold on to. But it was not, it was unexpected.
Did you ever feel good at some point in the 5K?
Yeah. Once I saw going down the hill after I saw my parents, the hill kind of turns and you go down this park that that's like less than a block from my house. I saw an old neighbor, Mr. Schmidt. He was out on his front lawn, like looking for some of his family members, I think. And I was like, Mr. Schmidt, it's Molly. And as he was like, oh my God, Molly, is your dad running? And I was like, I can't talk. But after that happened, this woman came running past me, and she was like, way to go, Molly. And she had heard me say my name or something like that. Nice. And it just felt so good to like be in like a happy, fun crew of people like running on my home turf, that it was hard to like not feel pretty awesome then. Like, nice. I was like, this is great. And she ended up winning. That girl was so fast. Like, it was great. It was really great. Yeah, it was awesome.
Awesome. And then you complete the 3-week haul by driving to Kansas.
Yes.
And doing Unbound 105.
Yeah, 105.
That sounds that's like a bad radio station, isn't it?
Yeah, Unbound 105.
Unbound 105. Soft rock from 1977.
That's right. No, I feel like Unbound 105 is going to be like all the stuff we listened to in high school.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's going to be like Matchbox 20 and Candlelight Symphony. What? Yeah. Candlestick Box. Super popular. So you have done this year, you have done your first gravel race in the Shasta 100 kilometers.
Yes.
And so now this was your 100-mile gravel race. What's next? I mean, are you like 200 kilometers next? Like, what's the next step up in distance?
That's a really good question, Chris. Here's the thing. Here's the truth of that. I love gravel racing. I think it's so fun. I think it's fun to like not have to stay 5 bike lengths behind the person in front of you. I like to like be out there with a bunch of people and like go adventure and like ride through water and slip down mud and all that stuff. But both of those races have felt like enough distance. Like I crossed the finish line and I was like, you don't have to do that twice. Like, don't even worry about it. But now I'm like, that sounds fun. But it doesn't still. I don't think that's fun.
200 is like it's a really long way. It's a lot of miles.
You're on your bicycle, and even people like you, and you're very good at riding a bicycle. I don't know if our viewers know that, but like Chris Bagg can ride a bicycle. You were on your bicycle for almost 12 hours. Like,
there was. That's
crazy. I would be on my bicycle for at least 16 hours is my guess.
Yeah.
Like, for at least like in that ballpark if I was having a good day. Like,
yeah. And I mean, that puts you like, when you're like you start doing the math and you're like, oh, okay, so that's because I think it's like a 6 a.m. start.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, so 10 p.m. finish.
Yeah, right. Like, are there even tacos at that hour? Because there were tacos when I finished, and like that's like then you're done. You're done. You're proud of yourself. You had a nice long day. Like, do you need to do that twice? There's a 350 option too.
Oh yeah, that's ridiculous.
What kind of psycho does that?
People like Paul LaCava.
Okay.
I don't know if you've met him,
Mm-mm.
but he's a local Oregon endurance legend. Um, those of you that don't know Paul, just go look up his Instagram account simply for the verbiage. It's La Vida LaCava is what
Awesome.
you're looking for.
Oh, I've seen that.
Um, oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it's crazy. There are blog posts about the words that he chooses. It's pretty unreal guy. But he did Trans Iowa when Trans Iowa was still like a
Oh
thing,
my God.
and that I think is 370 miles, and he did it in like 22 and change, like just under 24 hours. But like got caught in a terrible Iowa like thunderstorm,
There's
which
lightning there.
like yeah, like if you're from the Northwest, like that, you're like, ah, whatever. No, it's like you're gonna die. And he had to abandon his bike because it had metal on it and like hide in one of those like completely busted down shacks on the side of the road. And that's what Unbound 350 sounds like it would be to me, like
Yeah.
just trying not to die.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of what the 105 felt like too.
What was your low point?
Oh God. Like so mile 55 you got to stop at an aid station and have treats, so that was not my low point, but pretty much everything from there on was so that's about 50 miles of low, I think. But
Second half.
yeah,
Okay.
the back half. No, there was a big headwind in the last like 20-ish miles, and that was that just felt unfair in my soul. Like
I think especially because your coach told you that you would most likely have a tailwind
yeah.
during that
So
section.
to be fair though, like yeah, your coach tells you things, but also like if you grew up in the Midwest, like when you told me that, I was like, yeah, but it's also on the jet stream, so like you can't bank on anything in Kansas. So like, so I did think, see, Chris Begg lies to you, but I also was like, and you knew it. Like,
Ooh, we haven't touched base about the lake because I told you the lake was like awesome.
it was
Um,
awesome.
yeah.
That somebody saved my life there. I think quite literally. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, I ran out of my hydration pack like
Ooh.
really, really early in the second half. So I stopped at the aid station. There's only one stop there. So I went all the way through my 2 liter pack and like a bottle of water on the bike and got to the 55-mile point and got another 2 liter hydration pack, another bottle of water. And I was totally through that 2 liter pack by 79 probably. It took me about
Ooh.
24 miles to get through it.
Oh.
Um, and I was like, this is the trouble. Like that's not good. And I looked down, I was like, okay, so I've got about 25 miles left and I've got this like one bottle of water. And I was like, this is not gonna go well. This is how you go to the hospital. And there was this family at the lake that was handing out water bottles and like slices of watermelon. And I was like, I love you guys. Like, thank you. You're saving lives out here. And they're like, that's why we're here. And I was like, thank
There
you.
was somebody doing a similar thing, and when I did the 200 a couple years ago, like at like I mean I don't know, like I can't quite tell when it was. I think it was somewhere in the middle,
Uh huh.
but I had just run out of water and like was still a little ways off. Education First had like set up like an informal water stop, but I was still like 10 miles from there. And yeah, there was like a couple people on the side of the road, like filling up water bottles. And like they must do it because I think that like most people like cry when they see them. Like, oh my God.
You're
I'm just,
saving people.
yeah. And it was, I mean, seriously, it was just it's such a big lift to like get just a little bit of help out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's nobody really. Like, it's just you and a bunch of other people who are kind of falling apart. Like,
Did it get spread out towards like I know you were riding with some people in the last like half of it, but I remember being struck by just how like empty it gets.
I was never alone.
Mhm.
I was with a group of about 50 or 60 people for the first 25 miles, and then with a group of about 20, I think, for most of the rest of it. Um, I kind of fall off the back, or like they would, or pass some people or whatever, but like it was pretty consistently like the same folks, which is part of what I was really happy about. I was like, usually if I don't do things well, then I blow up at the beginning and fall apart, and finished with a bunch of people who were way back from where I was. But that's not what happened this time. There were the same people. We all stuck together. We all fell apart together. It was great. I have a question for you though. So like, what's fun about 200 miles?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I remember that race like very, very fondly. But I also got lucky. So no, I didn't have I didn't have any mechanical issues, like knock on wood. Um, yeah, so no flats. One of my through axles started working its way loose at like, in my rear through axle started kind of working its way loose at some point. And I was like, why can't I, like, the back of my bike feels really like weird and vague. And then I was like, oh, that's because your wheel is about to fall off.
Oh.
But that was it. That was like the only mechanical issue I had. Um, I I had to raise my seat a little bit at one point because like I was getting some like lower hamstring cramping, and I was like I bet I'm not getting enough like knee extension. And so I like bumped the saddle up, and that seemed to fix it. Um, yeah, like what's fun about that race? Like it like I really remember it as like a pretty long, pretty mellow sort of hallucinatory experience.
Cool.
Like I don't know, there was this point at maybe like 115 or 120 miles where you sort of realize that you're still going to like you have 5 to 6 hours left to go, and you have gone through like the first aid station is 60 miles behind you, and the second aid station you're not going to hit for another 30 miles. And it starts getting like lonely and very like the same. Like I was with the lead group until just before the first aid station, so like right around mile 60, and then started losing it through, as usual, mistakes all of my own making. But like, so I was like alone and tired and like starting to feel it, and I don't I don't know why I decided to do this, but like every person I came up to or rode with, I just tried to be like super duper friendly too. Like I started making jokes with spectators and like other riders. I thought about my dad a lot. Like, like the whole like last 3/8 of the race, I was thinking about like, you know, like your dad had to go to war.
Yeah.
like like you are riding your bicycle on a beautiful day in Kansas. Like just enjoy it. Yeah, and then I mean I think that along with like super good, very salty fueling. Like I really hit like the Pringles and the pickle juice like really hard, along with a lot of caffeine. And I mean, I honestly like, I can't think of a time during that race where I was really like struggling. I had just like a really magical day, and I don't know why I did. Um, I kind of like, I would like to do that race again, but I'm also pretty nervous because like you get that beginner's luck thing and you have a good event, and then you're like, oh man, like maybe that was just like a total fluke, and I'm going to go back and, and it's going to be like, it's just going to be flats and concussions the whole way.
Right. Oh God, concussions.
Yeah. I checked in with my buddy Neil Shirley from Envy, because I saw that he didn't finish, and I was like, "Yo, hey man, like just checking in, everything okay?" He crashed and got a concussion at mile 40, and didn't pull the plug until aid station number 2 at mile 155.
Ooh.
I know. Yeah.
That's rough. That's rough.
Yeah, no bueno.
No.
But this was funny. Like you could definitely tell he had been concussed because he was like, yeah, what happened to you? And I was like,
Like,
I was like, I think Neil and I have been through 3 times that I wasn't going to Unbound this year.
oh wow.
And I was like, no, I wasn't there. And he was like, oh yeah, that's probably the concussion talking.
Oh God.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I did have a lot of sadness at having missed out this past weekend. Like really wanting to be in Emporia on Saturday. Yeah.
So Leslie just asked if we'd recommend the race, and I would say without any reservation, absolutely yes. It was one of the best racing experiences that I've ever had. And I think the town of Emporia makes that I think just a quick story on the lunacy of what is Emporia, but I went out for a shakeout ride the day before and my cleat fell off of my pedal or off my shoe and got stuck in my pedal. And I rode back to the dorm that I was staying in because I, an idiot, didn't bring any tools with me because I was like, I'm going to be gone for 30 minutes, which is when that happens. And right. By the time I got back, the little plate that you screw the screws into that hold the cleat to the shoe was missing, had fallen out at some point, and the expo was closed, and I couldn't find anywhere to replace it. And I was they were out of cleats in the entire town because there were a couple bike shops in a small city. And so I went into a bike shop and I was like, hey, this is the situation. Do you guys I will buy a new set of cleats, whatever. Race starts in less than 12 hours. So at this point I'm just trying to figure out how to make it happen. And the woman who ran the shop ended up taking a cleat off of her own shoe to take that piece apart and give to me. And I was like, yeah. Seriously? And she's like, just have a great race. Yeah. It was awesome.
Every time I went to a bike store or had an interaction in Emporia, it was the same thing. Mm-hmm. Just super duper, you kind of get it that that event has a lot, well, not just that event. I don't know if you noticed all of the Frisbee golf courses around Emporia.
I did not notice that.
Emporia also hosts the World Championships of Frisbee golf.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah, right. So I can't just say that Unbound is what really sort of helps that town. But yeah, it feels like a town in upstate New York that has gotten a real gift. And I think that they are really trying to make the best of that gift.
Yeah, for sure. It was awesome. It was awesome. And the race was awesome. It was hard and hot and dusty, but it's great. And I felt I was really proud of myself at the end of it.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fiercely self-reliant kind of race.
Yeah.
It fits very much with our aesthetic of know how to fix your shit, because there's you are the person who's responsible to get yourself out of that course if something goes wrong.
That was the biggest takeaway I think I had from this, because I did know some people who did not have crew members and didn't hire crew. So they have an option to do crew for hire if you're traveling by yourself, which I did do. I was hoping to convince my little brother to go, but that didn't work. And it's $45 or something to have somebody seriously save your life, give you water. There's no neutral aid on the course at all, unless you happen to roll by somebody who's giving out water and watermelon. But I certainly didn't go by enough of those people to have made it safely to the finish. And that was, I think, the biggest thing that I learned. They're not kidding about that. Hire a crew person if you cannot bring your own.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. How about course markings? I think that's something that really throws people for a loop.
There were 3.
Both in Emporia.
Yeah, there were 3 in Emporia, and then there was a 20, 10, and 5 mile countdown or something that was. But you're on the same road at that point.
Yeah.
No, if I hadn't had the course in my computer or somebody to follow, there's no way I wouldn't have gotten lost. Yeah, I thought I got.
Yeah,
lost.
it's a real it's great. It's the way it feels, sort of the way racing used to be or should be, or that kind of thing. It really feels like an adventure.
There's very little hand holding.
Yeah. So everybody do it.
Do it.
So we've also got, all right. Yeah.
Wait, so Chris, we have not yet.
I know. Yeah. We haven't even cleared the gossip section. Here we are 30 minutes in, everybody. And, Alyssa, we will get to run form. I promise you.
We promise. We're just trying to keep you on till the end. That's all. But first, we've talked about me and how I'm doing so far, which is always fun for me. But Chris, tell us a little bit about how you're doing, because I know that you're in a bit of a different spot right now.
Yeah, I am struggling.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am definitely hitting that part of the season, and maybe also this part of my endurance career, where like suddenly like things are just real hard. And it's been this way, as you know, for about 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and confusing because I did DRVTT, and really rode real well. Like had a really good weekend at DRVTT. Set some fastest times for me, some high power numbers, like feeling super good, and then have basically just been really struggling for 5 weeks now. Having trouble like hitting power numbers that are usually very achievable, having trouble in races. I did my own version of like a long race on Saturday. I did the Oregon Grand Fondo Adventure race and just completely ran out of chutzpah, like probably 70 or 80 miles into a 130-mile ride.
Oof.
And sort of did everything right, like fueled correctly, drank correctly, didn't overpace it. So I'm in a spot of like what's going on. And I think what we're doing, we basically were you and I were just like, yeah, let's clear the decks of the workouts. Let's just do a technique only week in terms of swimming, um, and just really do like a forced rest,
Mm-hmm.
like kind of like an early mid-season break basically. And already like showing a few signs of life in terms of like motivation and mood and stuff like that, because I basically took Sunday, which is like was supposed to go out and do a hard run, and VT was dropping me on the warm up, and I was like, I'd probably turn around and run home. I just couldn't, just one of those days where just really just couldn't make the engine go at all. And then yesterday easy swim, today easy swim, so starting to feel better. But also, like, for those of you listening out there, when you start to feel better, that's not time to return to your
Right.
normally scheduled programming.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, no, mission will be accomplished by next Sunday if I really stick to just keeping it super chill for the rest of the week. But yeah, it's a confusing, unsettling place to be. I think a lot of athletes go through something like this either in a season or over the course of a few seasons. Um, I went and got my blood checked. Everything there is like not only looks fine, looks sort of better than ever. So that's also confusing. But I think we're all dealing with like some some kinds of hangovers of the last year, and this may be my particular one.
I think that's totally understandable. And I am very, very pleased that you are addressing it by taking some time off and like being easy on yourself instead of like, I know there's the inclination sometimes to be like, if it's just not there, like force it until it's there. But yeah, we've all seen where that ends up.
Yeah, it's I think we tried that, which is good. I think that's probably like the right first try,
Mm-hmm.
is to like be like, okay, let's push through for a week or so and see what happens, because like sometimes that athlete like turns around, it was like a small cold or whatever, or like a brief bout of allergies or just something, and for whatever reason you get back on schedule and it goes away. But this is at 5 weeks, and like just like I feel like I've been just a tiny bit sick for
Mm-hmm.
like a week, for a month. And at this point, with like two rough races and just like not a whole bunch of like native enthusiasm, then it's time to be like, okay, let's park it for a week. Um, doesn't mean that I'm going to be starting from like scratch. And hopefully you're just, probably going to feel a lot better, sometime next week.
Absolutely. It's very hard to undo the lifetime of fitness that you have built.
It's true. Yeah, that definitely will hang around for a while. So, okay, we are going to, we got a new little section here on detention that we're just going to try out. Just a little bit of news, everybody. So first of all, this is no longer pertinent to you, Molly, but still pertinent to some of our viewers and certainly a whole bunch of the North American triathlon scene. Ironman Canada pushed to
September.
One whole month.
Good for some people. You get an extra month to train. But yeah, my aforementioned, oh my God, I got to qualify for Worlds. I can't turn that around that quick. Now they're a week apart. Yeah. So.
And also I think, it seems like such a weird decision.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what does a month get them?
I think it lets them fulfill their commitment to the people who are dead set on racing this year. That's kind of the feeling that I got. And if you're a part of the Facebook group for Ironman Canada, which I don't know why I am, but I am, there are a million people who are like, I'm going to be there no matter what. Even if there's no race, I'm racing. But September is definitely going to be an interesting time in Penticton. The lake is not reliably swimmable at that point in the year. It could still be quite warm. It could still be fairly cold in the outside. I think the lake's certainly going to be cold, but
oh
yeah, it's going to be a different kind of day. I think, it could still be a great day. It could still be a really interesting day. And I wouldn't be, if I wasn't doing something the weekend before, I wouldn't necessarily have not just gone ahead and done this race again or done this race this year. But I'm not sad to push it to next year. So
I think it's a good call. All of the local racers and Johnny O, who's a really good coach who lives up here, all of the Penticton racers just pushed to next year.
Yeah.
Because they all said no, we're never swimming in the lake in late September.
Right.
Lake Okanagan, 1,000 feet deep.
Very, very cold also.
Very cold.
Yeah.
And apparently once the north winds start moving, the lake flips basically on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And it could be they say it's usually 8 degrees Celsius by late September.
Nobody even knows what that means, but it sounds cold.
It's barely out of the 40s.
It sounds cold.
Yeah, no bueno. So yes, the roller coaster year of Ironman continues. I think most of my athletes who are aiming for it have either deferred or gotten a refund. Mm-hmm. Are yours mostly in the same boat?
I don't actually think that my athletes were signed up for Canada. Most of my athletes are doing Coeur d'Alene this year for a full. So
it's so many so many Canada people.
Yeah, now that I'm saying that, I'm like, who am I forgetting? Oh no, I do have Don, of course, yeah. And I think he has a couple of decisions to make because he ended up with a couple of races that are scheduled now for right around the same time, and then there's the whole border issue and all that stuff. But yeah.
So other news, those of you who pay attention to the ITU circuit, Lucy Charles-Barclay,
yeah,
5th at WTS Leeds, which is just bananas. That's that's like a Bo Jackson kind of thing. I'm gonna walk off of my place in Kansas City and go play for the Raiders, no problem. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's an absolutely bonkers performance. Sorry, I just remembered that I have Stone also, and he has to make that decision. He's here right now, so I just wanted to say hi, Stone, and I do remember that you're also doing Ironman Canada. I was like, there's somebody else that's not in my head. But yeah, no, Lucy Charles-Barclay, absolutely insane performance. That was completely insane. Yeah, she's always been such a strong swimmer, but to be able to turn that around and swim with that crew and then also be able to hang on the bike and then have the second fastest 10K of the day, what?
Yeah. Just insane. We've seen over the past few years that on the men's side, that's not possible.
Right.
With Brownlee trying to do it. He ends up DNFing at Leeds, which is his home race course.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that felt very good. But like not able to do that. So I mean, like what an unbelievable performance on her part.
Yeah, just incredible. Incredible. It was a good weekend for women's racing.
Yeah, yeah, totally. The women's U.S. Olympic team is almost set.
Mm-hmm.
Summer Rappaport, she's had her slots sewed up since 2019.
Right? Those of us who've been
Because
signed up for Ironman Canada have nothing on the people who've been signed up for the Olympics.
the Olympics since since the test event in
Yeah.
Yokohama 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Taylor Knibb, the U.S. women, as usual, just like stomping all over the ITU circuit. She won Yokohama back in May. And then Taylor Spivey, something about all the Taylors.
Yeah. It's a good year for Taylors.
Fourth this past weekend at Leeds. Looks like she might get the at-large bid. Molly, how's the rest of that shake out?
Well, I know that oh my God, Katie Zafiris. Yeah, I always want to say her name wrong. She has had such an amazing like couple of years of racing, and I know she didn't have the race that she wanted to more recently this weekend, but she also, like, her father just passed away, and like it's been, I think, a difficult year for her. So I think there's some chance that like she could end up getting that committee selection. But I do think that like Taylor Spivey would be a great addition to that crew. It's a strong group, which is good because the British women are also looking super strong. So we got to get our stuff together, guys. We got to get our stuff together.
Beat those Brits.
Yep, exactly. But what about the men's crew?
Men's side, a little less set, though. Having a podium threat at the WTS level for the U.S. men is something that hasn't happened in a decade, basically, since Potts was bouncing around that circuit. But Morgan Pearson's second place at a WTS event. He had already qualified back in Yokohama. The rest of it is a little bit of, who's going to pick up the other two spots. But the other U.S. men, unfortunately, are kind of in that kind of like 15th to 30th rankings. Matt McElroy is in there. That's going to be a little bit of a harder pick for the selection committee. Though the Zafiris and Spivey pick, that's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I don't know who's I don't think there's a right decision in that. They're both awesome. Yeah, they're both awesome.
Okay, so all of that is going to be announced on June 16th. Apparently, they're going to live stream it. So check out the USAT Facebook page on June 16th. They're going to be doing the Olympic selection for the triathlon, which is awesome. Always fun to see. But yeah, here we are. We got about 15 minutes left before we got to run for that late bus. We are going to talk about some run form. Just so we don't end up jipping Alyssa's question, why don't we jump in and answer that right at the top about do you alter your run form when you are going to be running on trails?
I do a little bit, actually. I don't know if this is something that when working with people who've been training for trail runs, I do have my elbows out a little bit more, especially when running down trails more quickly, just for a little bit of extra balance. And then I try to keep my turnover pretty quick for trail running. But I think the biggest thing that I do is watch the terrain a little bit more and try not to be like looking down the whole time, which is a hard balance. I think trail running has so much more like ankle stability and hip stability and core strength than road running does. So it's I feel like you stop falling down quite as much as you continue on, but yeah, I don't think it's a different animal, but it's certainly something that that gets better. There seems to be a learning curve with.
Yeah, it's like when you get off your road bike and like hit the mountain bike or the gravel bike, like there's just more, like you just got to balance the system more. And so, yeah, I think I'm with you that you don't really change too much of what you're doing, except like, doing the things that are necessary for balance. But I think it's like one of those where you just really, really have to work on all of that stability stuff, like, and strength stuff outside of the actual running,
Mm-hmm.
because like, like trail runs, I mean, they're not all longer, but like I think that's what people go to trail running for, is like that sort of like, oh, I want to go and do like a long adventure trail run. And so like really making sure that you're doing your strength work, I think, is super crucial. Like being a strong athlete rather than like a fast athlete,
Mm-hmm.
because like if you're strong, you're going to be able to delay that sort of like cadence breakdown that I think you're talking about, where it's like really, really trying to stave off getting into that like trail, um, like waddle.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot more like hip flexor fatigue too. So like, yeah, range of motion always, but I think the same kind of stuff that you would do for run form and run technique anyway. But it comes in a whole lot. It gets a lot more important when you have to be more nimble, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So yeah, let's do like a quick 12 minutes on run form. So yeah, I mean, one of the things we wanted to address up front was this like general belief that you don't need to work on run form because it's natural and you run the way your body needs to move. Tell us a little bit about the like truths and maybe untruths of that perspective.
I think when that kind of like that thinking line of thinking came out and got really popular, I think it was addressing a really important thing, which is that you don't want to change something that's working for you just because it isn't what works for most people. And I think that this really came out around where people strike the ground with their foot, like where their foot strike happens. And I think there were some interesting studies that were done that said that like most elite runners tend to be midfoot runners. And that is not surprising, but it's also not for everybody. And so I think a lot of people tried to like change their gait and change their stride in order to run more towards their midfoot, and that resulted in a lot of injuries, because if you're changing something that has been working for you, then you're, there's a whole ripple effect and chain reaction of injury that can happen there. But I think it's also sent the message that like the way you run is the right way. That
Right.
like there's nothing that you need to do, and we know that's not true. Like technique is super important with running, and so is strength and like mobility and neuromuscular connection and all of that stuff. And that doesn't happen, especially for triathletes who are running maybe 3 or 4 times a week. It doesn't happen that quickly, and it doesn't happen by accident. So I think that having some technique work is incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think the big example here is like Lionel Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you look at him and you're like, "Ooh, God, like, how does that work?" And then like you like look at the clock and you're like, "Oh, it's working quite well."
Yeah.
Like, and so it's like him trying to run a different way. Like, I mean, who's to say it's going to like work any better? I think one of the things that, when we talked to Paul at Swim Smooth, like early on in his career, he tried to take Harry Wiltshire from like a 90 strokes per minute and turn him into a smooth, and just like instantly slowed him down by like 15 or 20 seconds per 100. And I think that, yeah, like we don't want to, the argument here is like figure out the reason that you're changing something,
Mm-hmm.
right? Don't just do it because like Lionel Sanders probably isn't going to be like, oh, I should run like Iliad Kipchoge. Like,
Right.
probably not a good idea, but he could do something to address, like, I'm sort of like, oh my gosh, like what is that going to turn into in 10 years? So I think, as like a lot of things that we talk with our athletes, as usual, we are making a plea for sort of like deliberate and intentional choices that come from a place of actual analysis.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Um, and I think that is, I mean, that's kind of what this, the clinic that we've been designing has been kind of focused on, is like, how do you take some of this, like, what feels very natural, because we all, most of us do run at some point, whether it's like to catch the bus or, to get home in time or to get to a meeting or whatever. Like we do run as part of our like natural lives. So what do you have to do to be strategic in order to do it properly, I guess?
Mm-hmm. So, thanking Enid for her cheers.
Thank you, Enid.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, let's we've got about 8 minutes to get through all of run form, but real quick, so your speed is going to come from your stride rate times your stride length. And one of the things that we saw happen in the last 10 or 15 years was, as athletes went to this whole thing about like, oh, I got to land on my forefront, I got to land on my forefront. Stride rates stride lengths everywhere shortened without a commensurate sort of rise in stride rate. That's going to do very little for your actual run speed. And like we just talked about, like it could go a long way to disrupting your movement pattern enough to injure you.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things is like, there's nothing magical about where your foot lands. Runners of all stripes hit the ground in different places. And in fact, it's actually impossible your heel is always going to touch the ground first, but that's not really the thing that actually matters. It's where your center of mass passes over what part of your foot is actually supporting you, what we call where it's loading. So you have some athletes that load in the forefront, which is sort of the direction that people have been trying to go to for the last 10 or 15 years. People who load right in the midfoot, and then there are people who load in the heel. And there are pluses and minuses to all of them. But, another plea to don't just like head to one of them because you think that that's the thing that you should be doing. Figuring out what you're doing already and then making some adjustments from there is always a good thing. That said, what do we know about sort of cadences? Like, what do we know about what there are some good rules of thumb for cadence on the run?
Yeah, I mean, I think we know a couple of good things about cadence on the run. I think that that if your cadence is below 160 strides per minute, which is 80 for cyclists and many triathletes, if it's below that, it's possible that you do need to kind of think about where your cadence is. But like what Chris said earlier, if you're just speeding up your footfalls but not addressing like form and technique limiters, you could just end up like just increasing the number of times that your foot hits the ground improperly. We do know though that like in general, a faster cadence is going to be much less likely to overstride. So if you are overstriding for some reason and that's causing like injury and impact in a way that you would rather avoid, then speeding up cadence can be really helpful for that. But there's this idea that like everybody needs to be running at 180 strides per minute or 90 RPM for many of us who still ride bikes. It's and that is, I think, a troubling like number, because we know that for the same athlete across a spectrum of paces, you're going to see a spectrum of cadences. So like when you're doing your warm up, you may be closer to 85. And then while you're in a race, or, if you're doing a half marathon, you might be right around 90. And then if you're doing like a 5K, maybe you're at like 92 or 93. Like cadence isn't static, and it isn't something that like should be the same across all paces and efforts. And we also know that like that data came from some excellent studies that Jack Daniels did on elite runners, but that is again like a super biased population of elite runners. So like, yeah, maybe it works for them, but if it doesn't work for you, then maybe the cadence that you land at is a little bit different.
So let's just kind of tear through the different angles that we look at when we are looking at a runner's form, and that's going to be front view, side view, and the rear view. So we've only got a few minutes left. Why don't we just kind of go through those angles and kind of talk about what are the things that we are looking for? And again, this kind of goes to like, we're not trying to put everybody into the same box, but we are looking for places where you are outside of the normal, and then trying to see like, if we change it, does it make it any better? So when we do these analyses, the first thing we look at is the runner running directly towards us. Molly, what are we looking for when we are in that plane of
So
analysis?
the nice thing that you can see with somebody who's headed directly at you is where their center line is, and you can see whether their arm carriage is crossing over their center line or if their feet are crossing. You want your feet to land no more than like 1/3 of your foot overlapping with the rear foot. So if that is narrower, if that stride is more like 1 foot right in front of the other, you can see a lot of that from somebody who's running directly at you, especially if they're running over like a line on a field or something. You can also tell a bit about posture and about where they're looking, and all of those things, just like swim. If you're looking down or if you're looking up too high, it really does dictate a lot of how your body's posture responds after that. Yeah, I think those are the big things I look for in front view. What about side view?
Yeah, side view is the big one, right? This is where kind of the rubber really hits the road, and literally.
Yeah.
So, one of the first thing we kind of look for is arm carriage, and a lot of the time you're going to see athletes with arms that are like bent too acutely, or they're too open, like they run very like tin soldiery. You have a funny story that you tell at the clinic about Dave Scott and some straight armed running.
It's
I
mean.
know,
It's
what a
mean.
jerk. Um, but we're looking for your arms to be to have like about 80 to 100 degrees of flexion in terms of bend. 90 is what we're aiming for, but we're happy to be on sort of 10 degrees on either side of that. Um, Head position, kind of looking down the road, not just like 10 feet in front. That's what I do. I look like 10 to 15 feet in front of me, and I really need to work on getting those eyes sort of up and down the road a little bit more.
You like to put your head down and work, Chris.
It's
That's
true.
just your style. It's just
Yeah,
your
I just
style.
just like to destroy my posture. Um, one of the things is we really want the foot to be under the knee when the foot loads. So this is that thing we were talking about instead of foot strike, about foot loading.
Hmm.
If we can see the middle of the foot lined up really nicely, like right under the kneecap, that means that the athlete's not overstriding. And so that's one of the things we look for is like, oh, is that middle of that foot sort of out in front of the athlete's knee? That's a clue that they're sort of reaching forward with their lower foot. And that is going to like really bring up the braking forces on their musculature, and could be something that could result in injury.
Hmm.
It's also just going to slow you down because you're literally like almost coming to a stop whenever you're extending that foot out in front of you. Um, when the athlete moves from foot loading to mid stance, so mid stance is when the other knee swings past the knee that's standing. So to figure it out on video, you just find the place where the knees are just, you can only see one knee basically. And we are looking for the ankle, the hip, and the shoulder to all be in a nice straight line that is leaning slightly forward at that point. If we get that, we know that the athlete is leaning from the ankles instead of just bending at the hips.
Hmm.
That is a really big thing that we're looking for. The next two that we're talking about is hip flexion and hip extension. Hip extension, that's when that leg is kind of getting out back behind you. And what we do is we look for the moment of toe off. So when your toe is barely still touching the ground and your whole system is driving forward through the air, we measure down from the hip to the knee, and we're looking for like 15 to 30 degrees of hip extension. If we're below that, it usually means that the athlete either has like really tight hip flexors, very possible, triathletes and desk soldiers, or really weak glutes, which is pretty normal. We see athletes with tight hip flexors and weak glutes all the time. On the other side, on the front end, hip flexion, that is when we're driving the knee forward and the hip is bending. At that point, we are trying to get over 20 degrees of hip flexion at the front. And again, if we're not getting there, it means that there is some kind of limitation in the hip flexor and the glute area.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Rear view is kind of where we go last. So what are we looking for when we are looking at the rear of the athlete?
We are looking for overpronation and supination, which is really just kind of underpronation. But yeah, we want to see what's going on with your ankles, whether or not they are they're collapsing and how much they're collapsing. A little bit of pronation is a natural part of your run stride. So it's not necessary. It's one of those things that's like not necessarily something to fix, but if you're overpronating to the point that like, you're getting much too sharp of an angle of bend in your ankles, that's definitely something to look out for. And then we also look a lot at shoulders, making sure that people have decent scapular retraction and like good posture when they're running, that they aren't letting their shoulders roll forward. And yeah, kind of where the foot kicks back too, because if you see somebody who has like a real turnout from like hip or from toe to heel, that can be an indication that there is some posterior weakness in their chain, their posterior chain. Sorry.
Yeah.
Reminder: I just got off the airplane and my brain is marshmallows.
Oh, totally.
Right
so, we talk about, so when we look at these things in the clinic, we shoot some video. What are some of the things that we tend to throw at athletes once we've seen a series of like not movement dysfunctions, but things where we're like, that's not necessarily ideal?
From like a correction process point of view?
Yeah. Like what are some of the things that we tend to see
with athletes like who come to our run clinics, common stuff that's going on?
Yeah, just anything. Like what do we, so we see, I think one of the things that we saw a lot of was athletes with not enough hip extension.
Yeah.
I think that was one that we saw a lot of. What's something that we would normally like toss at that athlete?
For not enough hip extension, I think making sure that they work on range of motion for hip flexors and like hip flexor strengthening and also like hamstring tightness and hamstring strengthening and like glute tighten. Like your whole body is working together back there. But we see a lot of people who run with a bit of like a duck posture where like their pelvis is sort of tilted forward, and those folks often have somewhat impaired range of motion in their hip flexors because they aren't able to access the muscles of their glutes, and that like posture puts them into a place where they aren't quite able to complete their leg swing in a fluid and natural like movement pathway. So for folks like that, it kind of becomes a question of like, what do you think is contributing to that issue? Because you can address the flexibility, but if you don't address the underlying imbalance or weakness, then you're just never going to get to the point where like that runner improves. So
yeah, it's like you have all this range of motion and there's like nothing, there's nothing that drives the lever on.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny, right? Like, when we do these clinics, we're like, we feel like broken records at the end, because we're always like, and clamshells.
Yeah, absolutely. Do your Jane Fondas, everybody.
Exactly.
But that I think is one of the big things that we want people to remember is
Totally.
we have a clinic coming up this weekend. So if you are interested in doing some run stuff, it's a lot of fun. We stand outside in the park. We work on a lot of this stuff. We do some really cool drills that are really hard to do on your own, like partner drills where you're kind of leaning into some resistance from tires or other objects. But it's hard stuff to work on by yourself, and it's hard if you can't see yourself to address some of these things. So consider that. I feel like Chris is maybe putting a link in the chat. Yeah. Did you just do that? Yeah,
I did. Okay, I just dropped a link in chat. So if you guys want to check it out, we would love to see you. Because it's a lot of fun. It's kind of the third piece of like performance optimization that we do here at the Endurance School with like swim analyses, bike fits, and now doing more and more of this run analysis stuff. And so we're really like able to complete the picture. Like Molly said, the whole system kind of works together, and this usually will give you a nice little chance to sort of figure out the places where you could use some addressing, and then you'll get some of the tools to go home and address it. And we have some fun drills. We get to play with some big inner tubes, which is always
really fun. It's
yeah.
really fun. It's 6:06 now, Chris. We have to
Oh
let the people go.
Yeah, we're gonna miss the late bus, and then it's like a wicked long walk home to 245 West Main.
Oh man.
So yeah, no, it's ages. So everybody, thank you so much. Thank you for giving us the week off last week. That was a blast. We will be right back here next week. We don't have guests lined up yet, but we are working on it. It will be somebody fun, no doubt. But please think about signing up for the clinic and tell a friend. And maybe we will get to see you this weekend at Grant High School.
In real life, it's super fun. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for being here.
Bye.